Hulk Hogan, the biggest star in the history of the wrestling business, real name Terry Bollea, passed away this morning at the age of 71. TMZ was the first news outlet to report his death. Cardiac arrest is the official cause of death. When I first heard the news, I was absolutely shocked and shaken. I couldn't believe it. Then I remember hearing all the news reports in the last few weeks about his deteriorating health, so maybe I really shouldn't have been as shocked. But whenever such a major name, a household name, an icon dies, it's hard to envision him no longer being here with us. Seeing the headline, Hulk Hogan dead, is something you knew one day would happen due to his old age, but you're still taken aback due to his stature in the wrestling business, but also, he is a big name. People know who Hulk Hogan is. If you ask the average guy on the street who really doesn't watch wrestling, name a professional wrestler, he's probably going to say Hulk Hogan. He really is the Babe Ruth of the wrestling industry. The biggest star the business has ever had. Nobody drew more people into buildings than him. Nobody created more wrestling fans around the world than Hulk Hogan. And nobody had the pop cultural fame that he had. He was a household name. Everyone knew him. Even in the 1980s, for instance. If you did not watch wrestling, you still knew who Hulk Hogan was. There were kids who had posters of Hulk Hogan in their bedrooms, but at the same time, they really weren't watching wrestling. There were people who had Hulk Hogan dolls, Hulk Hogan action figures. He was such a name. I mean, there's people who watched the Hulk Hogan cartoon that I believe WWF produced. There was so much to him, even if you didn't watch wrestling. You knew who he was. So, despite all the noise the last few weeks, you're hearing stories from Bubba the Love Sponge, a guy who Hogan had a falling out with, about Hogan's deteriorating health, that the fact, I believe Bubba said Hogan was on his deathbed, and I think he walked that back a bit. But there were so much reports coming out, and also when I saw that Jimmy Hart tweet, I think a couple nights ago, I got a little bit concerned because to me that looked like he is covering it up a bit, because he doesn't want, or maybe Hogan's family doesn't want this out there, so he's trying to downplay it when it might be a lot worse than we know. When he disappeared from the public eye, that's when I really got suspicious and a little worried, because he's there for he just signed on to be the commissioner, the public figure of the Real American Freestyle, which is an amateur wrestling promotion, and Hogan's there to promote it. And when he's not doing interviews, it makes you think, well, something must be going wrong. I mean, why wouldn't he be promoting it? The main reason they want him as their figurehead is because he can get on all these radio shows and podcasts to promote them. And when he's not doing that, it makes you think, why would they even sign him? And, right there, that's a red flag. It really was a red flag to me. So when TMZ reported his death, they're also the news outlet that reported Michael Jackson's death, another 1980s icon. Ozzy Osbourne also died a couple days ago. I did a tribute to him. So another 80s icon. Ozzy maybe more in the 70s, but man, two icons passing away within, believe, less than 48 hours. Really, really shocking. I just, as I said, I knew something was wrong. I can kind of tell, okay, something is, there's a red flag. I'll leave it at that. When I don't want to keep bringing up the last few weeks of what happened, but I just had a really bad feeling about Hulk Hogan for a while. I knew, the fact that he wasn't doing interviews to promote Real American Freestyle, and the tickets haven't been the greatest. I think they've done a little bit better now, and to be honest, it's sad to say, but they're probably gonna do really good now because Hogan's death, and people are gonna go see it, out of respect for Hogan. But I just looked at that as, he'd be all over everywhere. We should be hearing from him every other day, basically, to promote this. And their first show, I believe, is in a month. Late August is their first show. I knew something was wrong. I'd hate to keep going back to that, but I just had a bad feeling. This isn't good here. He's a piece of shit, Bubba the Love Sponge, but he might, he probably has sources close to Hogan. They have mutual friends. It's probably, there's something here. I didn't necessarily believe he was going to die this quickly, but I was prepared for some bad news about him. So, you couple that in with the fact that he's just not posted on social media in a couple of months. His last X post was on the end of April, so almost 3 months ago, when he did the whole thing with him and Eric Bischoff doing the whole third man. That was before they revealed the Real American Freestyle promotion. And his stuff on Instagram is just, you can tell it's just old stuff. It's nothing new. And I would have thought, okay, he should at least be, even if he's sick or he can't do interviews, okay, why isn't he at least using his social media to promote Real American Freestyle? Or at least even Real American Beer. Why isn't he using all his social media, all his millions of followers, to at least promote that, even if he can't do interviews? And the fact that he wasn't even doing that to me was, oh man, this isn't good here. I mean, he might be really bad. I knew the fact that he wasn't even doing that was even worse to me. Because even if he had neck surgery and he couldn't do interviews, he wasn't even using his social media. I figured, and I hate, to give I don't want to say, Bubba the Love Sponge is right, but when I kept hearing him say how bad Hogan's condition was, and the fact that there was people trying to deny it, but like we weren't hearing from him at all. You just knew something was wrong. So the man's gone. He passed away, as I said. He officially passed away in the police press conference at 11:17 a.m. He was taken to the hospital around 10 a.m. Passed away hour, 17 minutes later, around that time. So that's when Hogan died, 11:17 a.m. on July 24th, 2025. That's when the biggest icon in the history of the wrestling business passed on. Now, we have to talk about his legacy in wrestling. His death, everything that's surrounding the last couple months, I've gone over that. Let's talk about how much of an impact he had on the wrestling business. He started off in 1977 after trading with Hiromu Matsuda. He was first booked by the Florida wrestling promoter Eddie Graham. I believe he was first discovered by the Briscoes in the gym, and they got him booked. And he actually left wrestling for a while in the late 70s, but came back. Terry Funk, he was the one who introduced him to Vince McMahon Sr. His first major opponent in WWF was Ted DiBiase, who by the way posted a tribute to Hogan on his X. He talked about that. And he also talked about how Hogan promised him a favor, and DiBiase mentioned how in the 80s he made more money than you can ever imagine by working with Hogan. So as a heel, Hogan was paired with classy Freddie Blassie as his manager, and he had a cape. He was known as just this giant, big, muscular guy. To be honest, it was kind of similar to the gimmick he had in Rocky III, which we'll get to. But that was really his gimmick at first. He was not Thunder Lips, but he was still Hogan. And for people to say he couldn't wrestle, he only had the leg drop and the big boot and stuff. Well, I mean, watch some of the stuff in New Japan, and he was actually a really good wrestler or technical wrestler when he needed to be. The thing is, in WWF, all he needed to do was that. That's all people wanted to see. There was no need to do, all these other things. Why would he have to? The whole thing was the Hulk Hogan superhero, the Hulk Hogan character. But he could wrestle. This whole notion that he was a bad worker. No, watch that stuff. So he took an offer to work on Rocky III, which Vince McMahon, this is Vince McMahon's senior, Vincent J. McMahon. He was extremely unhappy with this. He did not want Hogan to do it, and he fired Hogan for doing it. Hogan talked about this on the Mr. McMahon documentary, and so did Vince McMahon Jr. That was his decision. Vince McMahon Sr. did not want him to do it, so when Hogan went ahead and did it anyway, he was let go. Hogan then went to the American Wrestling Association, AWA, owned by Verne Gagne. Started as a heel, but he just became a babyface quickly, and then he went on to become the biggest babyface in AWA, and he went on to become the biggest babyface in the entire company, and in the entire wrestling industry. During the territory days, he really, Verne Gagne, Hogan really became a major star under him. He was a star with Vince, yes, but with Verne, it really felt like he kind of came into his potential. He was this huge guy, really big, and when Rocky III came out, this is in 82, it launched him into superstardom. He was the guy in wrestling. He was the biggest star in the entire wrestling business. That movie in Rocky III, it's a huge hit, and it shouldn't be a surprise because Rocky 1 and 2 were big hits. But that classic scene when he lifts up Rocky Balboa, of course played by Sylvester Stallone, throws him out of the ring into the stands, that was great. And Hogan was really memorable in that movie. So he leaves AWA in late November '83 to go back to WWF, where he goes under Vincent K. McMahon. Now it's Vince McMahon Jr. to Vince McMahon we all know. And Vince's plans for territorial expansion could only be done with a major megastar, a major superstar, a household name like Hulk Hogan. He needed him as his top star, as his figurehead, as his main draw. And, the rest is history to WWF, now WWE. Hogan went on to defeat the Iron Sheik in January of 1984 to win the WWF Championship, and Hulkamania was born, and boy, did it ever run wild. Immediately after the title win, you had Gorilla Monsoon on commentary proclaim that Hulkamania is here. Hogan would always refer to his fans as the Hulkamaniacs, brother. And he always, when he was doing promos, he would talk about training, saying your prayers, eating your vitamins. That's what he always would say. Always the big superhero Americana 1980s figure. He just fit into the culture of the 80s, man. He was 1980s Americana. That's really what Hogan was. He was that guy. He fit in so perfectly, and a lot of it was timing too. He was just a perfect guy, right time, right place. It was just perfect. It really was. So, when we also see Hogan, his ring gear is obviously the classic red and yellow color scheme. He would do the classic gesture when he would come out. He'd rip his shirt off. He'd flex, and he would put his hand behind his ear to hear the audience. All those classic Hogan poses we all remember. His theme song, Real American, is the most recognizable wrestling theme song ever. There's never been a more popular, influential theme that immediately goes with a character more than Real American. I will say he used to come out to Eye of the Tiger by Survivor, and that was in Rocky III. That's how the movie opens. That was his theme song for a while. I'll be honest, I kind of prefer that in a way, but Real American is what fits him. That's what people know, remember, or associate with him more than any other theme song. He also had Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix, and other songs. There's a classic NWO song. We'll talk about that later. Plenty of classic Hogan theme songs, but Real American is what he's most associated with. So over the next year, Hogan, he really was the face of pro wrestling. Mr. McMahon really, he pushed the company into the what's known as the rock and wrestling connection on MTV. The rock and wrestling era, that's what it's known for. It's also called the Golden Age, the Hulkamania age, Hulkamania era, whatever you want to call it. As I said, it was just so much with timing. He was so perfect for the 1980s, and rock and wrestling, it fit perfectly. And it all led up to the first ever WrestleMania. Hogan teamed with his fellow Rocky III co-star, Mr. T, who played Clubber Lang in Rocky III, and they teamed together against Hogan's classic rival, one of his most recognizable rivals. Another wrestler unfortunately passed away in 2015, Rowdy Roddy Piper, and his tag team partner, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, another one of Hogan's great rivals, and also unfortunately Orndorff passed away. Tragically, 3 of the 4 WrestleMania main event participants are no longer with us. That's really sad. There was a good moment at WrestleMania 30 where you had Hogan, Mr. T, Piper, and Orndorff all backstage together, and they all embrace to coincide with the first ever WrestleMania main event on the 30th Landmark WrestleMania show. That was a good moment. Remember that. Unfortunately, it's only 11 years ago. That's not that long ago. 11 years later, 3 of the 4 are no longer with us. Very sad, man. Hogan and Mr. T, before WrestleMania, the first one, they actually hosted Saturday Night Live, and that was a big deal to promote the show. They were on so many TV shows, so many talk shows. They were everywhere. Hogan and Mr. T, man, they promoted the heck out of the first WrestleMania, and they helped make it into such a big deal. Also, Cyndi Lauper deserves some credit as well for that. She was also a big musical star who they brought in, so there was a lot of people, but all the promotion, man, Hogan, Mr. T, Cyndi, it was such a big deal to get that first WrestleMania off and going. It was as promoted as much as you can possibly ask for. So it's a huge success. The first WrestleMania was, and the promotion and Hulk Hogan, it just became even bigger. Hogan, in the 80s, at this time, he's the most requested celebrity for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which is a children's charity. All wrestling fans know what Make-A-Wish is, but he was the most requested celebrity in the 1980s. That tells you his popularity and how much of an influence he had on little children. They loved him. He was beloved. He had action figures. He had plush dolls, T-shirts, lunch boxes. His poster was on the wall of millions of young Hulkamaniacs all over the world. In 1986, he had a legendary rivalry with Paul Orndorff. He wrestled King Kong Bundy in main event WrestleMania 2. Then came the legendary bout with Andre the Giant, the most paused moment in the history of professional wrestling, which was when Hulk Hogan body slammed Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3 in the Pontiac Silverdome. When people have an image of pro wrestling, that's what they think. That's what I think. When I think of wrestling, WWE, WrestleMania, first thing I think of is Hogan slamming Andre. That is the visual of wrestling. And it was so popular that even in the 1980s, when everyone knows wrestling's a work, it was on highlights on SportsCenter. And it was everywhere. Major sports sports stations covered it like it was, a legitimate shoot sport. That's how much of an impact it had. Him slamming Andre in front of all those people, it's just such an iconic moment. That insane crowd, him hitting the leg drop, him winning, holding the title, posing in front of the crowd, selling his back still. I'm sure his back still hurt him to this day from that. Such a great moment. that is really, that's wrestling. That's to me, that's such what wrestling's all about. The major match, incredible moment, the victory, the great babyface triumph. Man, that WrestleMania 3, I love WrestleMania 3. I love that main event with Hogan and Andre. That's almost, in some ways, feels like the peak of wrestling. It really does. So he also had a rematch with Andre the next year in a televised event called The Main Event, which aired on NBC. It had 33 million viewers, the most watched wrestling event ever. Insane. That's not even feasible. 33 million. That can never happen today. Not even in. Can't even get 5% of that. That's insane. It's mind blowing how many people tuned in to watch and how popular wrestling was. And I understand, it's television. More people watch TV now than than they do now. It's still such an achievement. So Hogan did lose the belt, and he went on to form the Mega Powers with who was the guy who was the world champion at that time, Randy Macho Man Savage. And Hogan and Savage teamed together at the first SummerSlam, which was called SummerSlam 88. They took on Andre the Giant and Ted DiBiase, who are known as the Mega Bucks. Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage won. And then they did the Love Triangle with Hogan, Miss Elizabeth, and Savage. It all led to WrestleMania 5 when the Mega Powers explode. Great main event with Hogan and Savage. Hogan regains his belt. His next big program that people remember was the Ultimate Challenge at WrestleMania 6 when he faced the Ultimate Warrior. He lost that match. Then the next WrestleMania after that was when he faced Sergeant Slaughter. That was known as Superstars and Stripes Forever, when he regained the title. I think the next WrestleMania, that's when he faced Sid Justice. Everyone wanted to see at WrestleMania 8 Hulk Hogan taking on Ric Flair. Unfortunately, we didn't get that match at that WrestleMania. Have to mention Ric Flair. He was very emotional in that TMZ interview. You see him crying and very sad. I hate seeing Ric like that. He spoke with Jimmy Hart the day before, and Jimmy reportedly told Flair that everything was fine. I don't know if Jimmy meant that. I'm sure Jimmy Hart meant well. He was so close with Hogan, but I got the impression Jimmy was protecting the family. Maybe he didn't want this out there. I understand that, and I really feel bad for Jimmy Hart. I don't know what the nature of him and Hogan's relationship is, if he's like his manager, but they were really close. Anytime you'd see Hogan make an appearance, Jimmy Hart was always with them. So definitely feel for Jimmy Hart right now. Also, of course, with Hogan's family, his kids, Brooke and Nick, you feel for them and his wife, and it's very sad. So, and when you got into the early 90s, 92, 93, Hogan's star really had waned. He had gone to Hollywood after he left WWF. Then eventually he was recruited by Eric Bischoff to go into WCW. And Hogan was in WCW, and he was playing the same gimmick as the WWF. It really didn't work as much. Then came what is the greatest heel turn in the history of professional wrestling. You had the Outsiders, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, both left WWF. Scott Hall was formerly Razor Ramon, Kevin Nash formerly Diesel, and they were the Outsiders, and they would cause and just wreak havoc all over WCW. They faced a main event at Bash at the Beach against Sting and Randy Savage, and you had Hogan basically make a run-in at the end of the match, and everyone's thinking he's just making the save for Savage, and he's going to fight off the Outsiders. But there was the great line from Bobby the Brain Heenan, who said, "Whose side is he on? Whose side's he on?" And I'm thinking, well, I'm sure I think Hogan's in that interview saying he gave it away, but it's still really memorable. I actually think it helps it now. And that's when Hulk Hogan turned on Randy Savage, and he aligned with the Outsiders, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. And then on Nitro, they officially formed the New World Order of Professional Wrestling, brother, the NWO. The greatest faction of all time. One of the most memorable acts ever. It was such a great heel villain act. And it was the greatest heel turn we have ever seen. There's never been anything like that. When he turned, you saw fans trash the ring. They were shocked. And even though people were a little tired of him as his babyface persona, they couldn't believe Hulk Hogan turned heel. He went evil. All the kids who loved him, how dare him? They went ballistic, those fans. And he got so much heat. And it was one of the greatest villain characters of all time. It's incredible how he had the greatest babyface. Hulk Hogan is the greatest babyface of all time. Hollywood Hogan might be the greatest heel of all time. It's incredible that he was able to accomplish that. He created two major wrestling booms, first in the 80s with Hulkamania and then in the 90s with the NWO. Nitro went on to beat Raw 83 weeks in a row because of that. And it really forced WWF to create the Attitude Era, and that created a huge boom for them. And eventually they did defeat WCW. But Hogan's NWO, him turning and the NWO forming, WCW having all that popularity, WWE was forced to innovate. They were forced to change. And they had to step up their game, and they had the Attitude Era. Stone Cold Steve Austin was their top guy. Eventually, WWF defeated WCW, and wrestling really became better for it. Really. Not talking about WCW going down, but WWF becoming better. It made wrestling better. It made it so much exciting. You had fans of WWF and WCW going back and forth. It was basically almost people would treat it like a sports game or a football game, who would ever win. Each night on Monday, it would be the fans would all talk about it. But after WCW goes under, Hogan didn't. He wasn't involved in the invasion angle. But in 2002, he eventually returns to the WWF, which this later became WWE in a couple months. Later in 2002, I believe summer of 2002 officially became WWE, but it was still WWF when he returned, and he went on to feud with The Rock, and they had a classic match at WrestleMania 18. One of my favorite matches. I mean, this was the same venue when Hogan faced the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 6, another iconic, legendary match, which was it was a classic. And it was a different match from Rock and Hogan, but in many ways it was similar because of the crowd reaction. And 12 years later, after that classic match with Warrior, in the same venue, the Sky Dome, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, Hogan has another classic with The Rock. I love that match, man. That fan reaction's incredible. I watched it as a kid. I really didn't know too much with Hogan. I was a young kid at that time. I was like 6 or 7. I knew Rock, so I was backing Rock. And when I saw that crowd reaction for Hogan, I started cheering for Hogan. I was thinking, wow, this is incredible. And when he hulked up, oh my God, those fans were going ballistic. What a moment. What a moment. And after he kicks out of the Rock arm, he hulks up, hits the big boot, hits the elbow. Of course, Rock kicks out, and Rock, of course, he should have won. It made sense. But Hogan was so over. And then I remember the following SmackDown, I believe, or Raw. It was a Raw or SmackDown. They were in Montreal after they were in Toronto. And Hogan just gets this incredible standing ovation from the fans. It was an amazing moment. He was so over. It was insane. And he was so over that they had him face Triple H for the undisputed title at the following pay-per-view, which was Backlash. Hogan won, and he regained the title again. He became champ again. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Him in WCW, not even talking to Vince McMahon, if all that he's WWE champion one more time. It was really a great moment. Even though the title reign didn't last long, it was still cool to see him with the belt one more time. So he had a lot more appearances in WWE. He had the feud with Vince at the following WrestleMania 19, which was actually a good match. And he would make appearances then. He did the Mr. America gimmick. He had feuds with Randy Orton. in '05. And, just as time went on, Shawn Michaels in 2005, and he had the match with Randy Orton at that SummerSlam, and the following SummerSlam in 2006. But, we'd see less of him, and he went to TNA for a while, there for a few years. People are upset with him and Bischoff. The company was going down before them. They brought some interest, but, TNA was just too far behind WWE to ever make any sort of difference there. We can talk about all the controversies. That's really almost it for his wrestling career. He came back to WWE in 2014, had an amazing moment at WrestleMania 30 with him, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and The Rock all in the ring together with the three biggest stars in the history of the WWE at WrestleMania 30, a landmark event. All of them in the ring, embracing each other, drinking a beer. Awesome moment. Love that. Also, people remember Hogan's botch. He called the Superdome the Silverdome. That just made it more entertaining, and it was just fun. It was really harmless, and it was fun, and that was really a great segment. But the controversies we can all talk about. We all know what's there. I really don't want to. I want to talk about what this man did for the wrestling business because I really appreciate it. Because of him, I've had so much joy watching wrestling. All these years, I've been a fan. It's because of his contributions to the business. Even though I started watching at a time when Hogan really wasn't in WWE. He was in WCW. I was watching WWE more than WCW, but, he made it big. He made it such a big thing. He put wrestling on such a level that, I could watch it. I was into it. He built the foundations, and without him, I wouldn't be a wrestling fan. I have no doubt. It's incredible what he did for WWE. WWE is the house that Hulk Hogan built. There are two figures to this company that I don't know. I don't think this company would exist in its form right now. Maybe there would still be territories. I don't know. But WWE becoming this major industry, this major corporation, it wouldn't have happened without Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon. Vince, those guys, they are WWE. You cannot separate this company without those two names. They are so, it goes without saying. To be honest, I've always dreaded this day. I've kind of known one day Hulk Hogan's going to die. As he aged, I knew one day it would happen. I also dreaded the day that Ric Flair would die, and I dreaded the day that Vince McMahon would die. Those guys are just so instrumental. They're so iconic in the wrestling industry. They're so influential. I just knew one day it would happen, and to be honest, I don't like saying this. I really thought Hogan would be the last of them to go. It's really a shock, despite, knowing about his health issues that, he died before Ric Flair did with all his issues, that he died before Vince, and Vince is almost 80. We know about some of his health issues. It's really hard to grasp. It's difficult to cope with. I'm not going to lie. It's really, it's still difficult to process, even though I was aware of all his health issues. So I can't say I'm totally shocked. This came out of nowhere. I couldn't think this could happen. We were seeing him all over, social media. We're seeing him all on these interviews. No, he was radio silent for the last few months. And I think we know why. He had neck surgery not too long ago. And for what's being reported, what I've heard, this may not be true, but it damaged his trachea and he couldn't talk. And, he was in and out of the hospital. He had a lot of complications from the neck operation. And, he had a cardiac arrest this morning. And that's ultimately why he's no longer with us. I still cannot believe Hulk Hogan is dead. I can't believe he's no longer on this earth. It's so difficult to process because he's such a name. He is such a legendary icon. He's a household name. He's Hulk Hogan. Are you kidding me? It's so difficult to process. It's undoubtedly the biggest death in the history of the wrestling business. There's never been a bigger name in wrestling who has died than Hulk Hogan. There's never been anything like it. It is, it's just not even, it's, as I said, it's difficult to even grasp. It's difficult to assess the gravity of this situation. Hulk Hogan, man, you really didn't want to see the day, but it's a day you knew would happen one day as he got older. It's just, when it's here, it really hits. And again, I hate going back to this, but with all his health issues, it really shouldn't be too much of a surprise. It's just when someone with his stature dies, it's difficult to process. From the body slam heard around the world to finding out which side he's on, this man's legacy will live on forever. Rest in peace to Terry Bollea. Condolences to the Bollea family. And goodbye to the most legendary icon the wrestling world has ever known. The immortal Hulk Hogan. Hollywood Hogan and the NWO are for life. Hulk still rules, and Hulkamania will live forever. Rest easy, brother.